Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to continue on with our sort of Euro theme that we've been doing over the last couple of weeks. So later on today, Scotland are going to take on Croatia in the final game in Group D. Both teams so far have drawn one game and we both need a win to go through to the knockout rounds. Obviously I'm a little bit biased and would love Scotland to win because it's our first tournament in 23 years, so I want us to go as far as we can. But you know, Croatia historically have been a very, very strong team. I'm a huge fan of Luka Modric. Ivan Rakitic was a player that I always liked as well, but they don't seem to be the same team that they were back in 2018 when they got to the World Cup final, so I'm not sure what's going on with them. But you know, Croatia supposed to be a beautiful country. I've met some lovely people from Croatia over the years, so I do hope that I can get down there and visit sometime, along with Slovenia and Montenegro, of course. Those are the places that I really want to visit in the Balkan region in Europe. But yeah, I thought since Scotland are playing Croatia today, we would review a Croatian beer on the channel because we haven't been able to do too many of them. There's not too many Croatian beers make it outside of Croatia, of course. We've only really done a few things from Garden Brewery so far. But yeah, for this one, as I say, we're going to another brewery that I've never tried anything from before. These guys are credited with having been the first ale brewery to open up commercially in Croatia, and they're supposed to do some very good beer. So yeah, we are going to go to a little place called Zabok, which is to the north of Zagreb, the capital, in the kind of northeastern part of Croatia. And we're going to have a look at my first beer from Nova Runda craft brewery. So this particular beer is called Wash, Rinse, Polish and Repeat. It comes in at 6.5% ABV, and this one is being described as an American IPA. Now it also tells you on the front of the can that this one is 60 IBUs, so I'm guessing that this might be more of a West Coast IPA. I guess we'll find out when we open it up and smell it and taste it and things like this, but it's also hopped with Chinook, Simcoe, Comet and Sabro. So yeah, really curious to see how this one turns out. Hopefully it's another good beer. As you can see, it's a half-litre can, and I bought this one through Beer Dome in the Netherlands. And I got this just because I didn't recognise the brewery, but it turns out that these guys are the first ale brewery in Croatia, which is pretty cool. But certainly looking forward to trying it. Hopefully you guys enjoy my take on this one, and hopefully it's another good beer. Definitely cool to have a few more Croatian beers here on the channel. If you are watching from down there, please let me know a good Croatian web shop that sends their beers across the EU, and let me know some other breweries that I should check out as well. So yeah, let's crack on with this one then. As always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my future reviews that hopefully I can do from Nova Runda. This is the very first time I'm trying one of their beers, as I mentioned, but there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you happen to be interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. I will make one for the Croatian beers that I've reviewed for you, and hopefully we can add more beers to that over the next little while. And as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, to tell you a little bit about Nova Runda then, on to my brewery notes. So Nova Runda, as I've mentioned to you already, are based in Zabok, which is to the north of Zagreb, the capital city in the kind of northeastern part of Croatia. Croatia, of course, is a little bit like a kind of N shape. So the back of the N is the Dalmatia coast, and then it kind of curves round. You've got Zagreb in the top corner, and then, you know, it's got a little pointy bit that goes down towards, you know, Bosnia-Herzegovina. But yeah, it's supposed to be a very beautiful country from what I've heard, and I do want to go there and visit. But this brewery was founded back in 2013, and the two men behind the company are Miroslav Šuvac and Marco Filipin, who are childhood friends from Daruvar, a bit to the south, the kind of southeast of Zagreb, I guess we could say. But Miroslav originally studied economics and then worked in IT, while Marco graduated in science and then worked in banking. But apparently the pair of them travelled to the Czech Republic in 2009 during their university days, and they were just struck by the beer scene there because they didn't really have anything like that in Croatia at the time. But when they returned home, they were disillusioned with the quality of the beer that they had in Croatia, and so they decided to fix this by brewing beer for themselves. So they started off using the internet forums and some crude equipment, and then they joined the homebrewing group pivovarstvo.info, and this is where things really started to take off for them. But in 2014 they took the decision to quit their jobs and turn their attention full-time to their brewery. So they started to secure some finances through crowdfunding, and this really helped them get the company off the ground, and apparently they got quite a bit of support from lots of different countries. But in the early years they were gypsy brewing their beers, first at Kuchan Marov and then at Jastrebarsko, if I've pronounced those correctly, probably not, so apologies for my bad Croatian pronunciations. But they knew that gypsy brewing wasn't feasible for them in the long term, and so they decided to invest in their own brewing facility, and they found the location in Zabok and got started on building this up. But as it stands, Marko is in charge of the brewing side of things and recipe development, whereas Miroslav takes care of the business side of the brewery. And initially these guys were only producing draft beer for sale in pubs and restaurants because they were concerned about the freshness of bottled beer sitting around on supermarket shelves and things like that. They really felt very strongly that beer should be sold as fresh as possible. But after a while they started producing cans, and that's what we're now getting across Europe, which is great to see. But at present they can produce around 180,000 litres of beer per year, and they've got an on-site tap room at the brewery. From what I understand, they're looking to move to a new facility and have an even bigger brewery, and since 2016 they've also had their own beer festival, which is called Beer Yard. But the name of the brewery, Nova Runda, this translates into English literally as next round or new round, and it's got two meanings. So it can mean both to order a new round of beers, and it also means like a fresh start, and this was to kind of reflect the fact that these guys decided to start on a new career basically. But these guys, as I say, are also credited with having been the first ale craft brewery in Croatia. So these guys really helped kick it off there, the first kind of big craft brewery, I guess we could say, in the country apparently. But as of June 2021, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced 55 different kinds of beer according to Untappd, and apparently their sort of flagship beer, if you like, is their C4 IPA. So fingers crossed we can get a hold of that one at some point. I would like to have a go at that beer and see what it's all about, but this is the one that I was able to get on beerdome.nl. So yeah, hopefully they get a few more Croatian beers and breweries and things through that at a later date. But I love Beerdome because they always get random stuff. So yeah, this is one that I thought could be really interesting to review. I didn't actually think about the Scotland-Croatia game when I ordered this one. I just ordered it because it was a brewery I hadn't tried anything from before. But yeah, that's all I can really tell you about Nova Runda Craft Brewery for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website, you can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can of course check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all the other different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, with that then, we are finished with the history section. I'll just let you have a little look at the artwork on this one before we open it up. As you can see, it's quite a tall can because it is 500 millilitres, not the usual 440 that we have most of the time here on the channel. There you can see the Nova Runda symbol on this one, which looks great, and I do like the artwork on this. They've got a few different kinds of artwork on their beers, but it looks very, very nice, this one. But it tells you on the back here, a few simple steps make the difference: wash, rinse, polish and repeat. We like to drink our beer from the proper glass: clean glass, washed, rinsed and polished glass. So yeah, okay then, fair enough. But looks great, very nicely presented. The hops in this one: Chinook, Simcoe, Comet and Sabro. You know, Chinook, 13-14% out. All of these hops incidentally are American. Chinook, lovely big, it's strong grapefruit, you know, it's big piney resins in my experience, about 14% alpha acid. Simcoe is a big passion fruity thing, depends what kind of IPA you've got, how it behaves, whether it's softer and juicy or more oily, but yeah, about 12% alpha acid. Comet is quite an interesting one. I think that comes in around 11 or 12% alpha acid. That's quite a tropical one as well. You don't find that all that often, but I remember it being, you know, nice and mangoey and passion fruity as well. And then Sabro is one of the newer ones. It's a bit stronger, I think about 14% alpha acid. It gives you a kind of nice juicy tangerine orange note, but it also gives you a little bit of a kind of coconutty type vibe underneath as well. But a lot of people talk about it being pina colada, of course. But yeah, this one, I think I told you lies at the start of the video. I might have said this was 6.5%. It's 6.3. So my apologies for telling you lies about this beer. It's a 6.3% IPA, this one, but it says 60 IBUs, so I'm guessing that it is going to be a West Coast one. But without further ado then, let's get this guy out and we'll get on with the tasting. I'm very, very curious to see what this has in store for us. And, you know, it worked out quite well that Scotland are playing Croatia and I happened to have this beer. So, yeah. So I think that'll do for the moment. I think we've got about 75% of it out and into the glass for the moment. So let me just realign this so that my OCD is happy. And there we go. So, yeah, it looks very, very nice. So, yeah, it definitely looks a little bit more like a kind of West Coast IPA. This one, does it have the ingredients in English? It just says barley malt, yes, so I'm guessing it says barley malt in English, so this probably is going to be more of a West Coast IPA rather than anything else. And we do like West Coast IPAs. I've been missing them because everything's been about the haze craze these days. But yeah, as you can see when we poured this beer, it poured with about a quarter finger of a frothy, I would say kind of cream coloured head. I wouldn't describe it as being perfect white, but that's faded away to just be a very thin kind of wispy layer, and there's a bit of a kind of frothy ring just around the edge of the glass there. But yeah, one or two big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass, a few little ones going up towards the bottom of the head there, but overall it looks very, very nice. And in terms of colour, this beer, I would describe it as being a very, very light amber, this one. It's got a bit more of that kind of natural haze vibe to it, which you would expect of a West Coast IPA rather than the big soupy gloopy type haze that you'll get from a New Englander. But yeah, it looks very nice. So remember, the colour of these beers depends on 1, the type of malts that you use. This determines the magnitude of your colour. 2, the length of your wort boil. The longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, thus you get a darker colour of beer. An IPA like this is probably going to undergo a boil of 70 to 90 minutes, something like this. And looking at the colour of this one, it doesn't look, I think it's probably got a few kind of biscuit malts and or maybe Cara Munich or these kind of things. It doesn't look overly dark, so it's obviously a regular boil and sort of lighter type malts they've been using in this one. But adjuncts and barrel aging will also play a role in determining the colour of your beer, but those factors are not at play when it comes to this one, of course. But in terms of an IPA, it certainly looks the part. It certainly looks more like a West Coast IPA rather than everything else. But yeah, it looks great. So let's take a closer look at the aroma of this one and see how we get on. Nothing particularly surprising about this beer when we consider what style it is. So yeah, aroma time then, guys. Ooh, it does smell quite nice. That it smells a little bit old school, and we do like that. I tell you something though, you can smell the Sabro in this right away. You get that coconutty, fruity thing coming out of this one right away, straight off the bat. Yeah, the aroma of this is very, very nice. So first impression of it is that it comes across as a very light, very crisp and kind of drinkable IPA, this one. Croatia, my impression of Croatia is that it's, a very hot country. I don't know how it is up in the more kind of mountainous regions and things. I would guess it might be a little bit kind of humid and things like this. But yeah, I can see this one, as I say, it comes across as quite a crisp West Coast IPA. And when you think about Zabok and Zagreb, I guess, as well, these, I would assume that there's quite a bit of heat down there because we're not far away from the Mediterranean, So, yeah, I can imagine it's pretty damn hot there. So you would think they would want a beer like this, a nice kind of crisp IPA. But it smells really good, actually. But the Sabro hop in this really dominates, actually. So let's have a closer look at the aroma and just see how we go. So the backbone of this beer, there's definitely a nice little bit of a sort of white bready character coming out of this one. You can smell that. So lovely kind of smoothness in there. You definitely get a wee bit of bread crust out of the beer. And there's a wee touch, there's a bit of brown sugary malt in this one. So there's an element of sweet caramelly quality in the very middle of the nose. You've got a nice little touch of a kind of biscuity McVitie's digestive sort of vibe to the beer as well, which I think is great. And pardon me, the aroma coming out of this one, on that malty side of things, it really is very, very light. Soft white bread, a bit of a bread crusty note to it. Maybe there's a little touch of a kind of wholemealy bread in this one. So yeah, I'd be curious to know what malts it is they've used. It smells a little bit like German malt, or maybe Austrian malt or something like this. I don't know if they produce their own malt in Croatia, actually. I know that in Slovenia they do, and they've got a lot of hops that they produce just over the border in Slovenia too. But yeah, the aroma out of this is very, very nice. Yeah, soft white bread, bit of bread crust, a wee touch of a wholemeal bready kind of thing in there, sweet caramel, bit of a McVitie's digestive biscuity sort of thing. It goes together. It does go together really quite well, actually. So yeah, it works. It really does work quite nicely, this one, in terms of the malt base. But it's really, this beer is quite dominated by the kind of juicy, fruity side of the hops, which is kind of interesting. So yeah, I don't think there's too much else we can say about the malty side of the beer. But let's look at that hoppy side of things then. So on the green component, there's a wee touch of earthiness in there for sure, but not too much. You've got a lovely big kind of floral brightness to this beer as well, which I think is great. So lovely big kind of floral aromaticity out of the beer. It's not spicy, it's not yeah, you know, it's not overly spicy, but it's got a nice kind of brightness to it, and at the same time it's got a little bit of a kind of dankness in there, which is kind of interesting. When you've got Chinook in there, that would make sense. You can smell a little bit of the kind of deeper pine resins, but I think the floral notes to this one really kind of drowns that out more than anything else. But on the front of the nose, you do have a little bit of a zesty, kind of grassy quality coming out of the beer, which I can certainly appreciate. But yeah, other than that, I think it's fair just to say that the green component is more dominated by the big bright floral side of things. So yeah, it goes together very, very well. So thumbs up to Nova Runda in this one. I think it works out very, very nicely. So in terms of the fruity side of the beer then, this is where it gets quite interesting. So you can definitely smell a slightly stronger passion fruity note to this one, and it's almost got a little bit of a kind of dried passion fruit quality. It's got a little bit of a kind of jammy sort of thing going on in this one. And I'm curious, I think that's most likely to be coming from the Comet. It's got a little bit of a kind of dried passion fruit, maybe a little bit of a slightly peachy quality to it, and I think that's Comet that's going to give you that. So yeah, a little bit of a pungent passion fruit, a little bit of a more kind of juicy and mellow passion fruit. So I think the stronger the notes, I'm not really getting the kind of grapefruity elements that you can sometimes get from Chinook, but yeah, passion fruit, which I would say is most likely to be the Simcoe. And it's a bit more oily in this beer, which is standard for Simcoe in a more West Coast type IPA. But like I say, a little bit of a peachy note to it, a little bit of a kind of dried apricot-y sort of vibe to the beer as well. I think that's it. It really has this dried apricot jam kind of thing to it. This one on the fruity side of things. But you can definitely smell a little bit of a kind of coconutty component too, with mixing in with the fruit in this beer, which is really interesting. And then you've also got that big juicy, fruity, orangey vibe coming out of the beer too, which I think is quite distinctive. But yeah, that of course is the Sabro in this one. So there's a wee bit of everything coming out from the hop, or there's a wee bit coming out from each of the hops in this beer, I should say. It's quite interesting. But yeah, fruity notes, passion fruit. Yeah, definitely a bit of passion fruit, a wee bit peachy for me, and a dried apricot. Then you've got that juicy sort of tangerine orange and a bit of coconut underneath. I think that summarises the fruity side of the beer quite nicely, quite succinctly. So let's leave it at that for this, for the aroma side of things, and let's have a taste of this one. So yeah, this one is the, how do I say it, the wash, rinse, polish and repeat, to make sure I've given it its full name. 6.3%, I suspect American West Coast IPA from Nova Runda in Zabok in Croatia. Good luck to both teams later. I look forward to the game, and definitely cool to feature these guys on the channel for the first time. So let's get stuck into this beer. Slanje, skål, cheers, or as they say in Croatia, živjeli. Yeah, that's quite nice. I'm going to say first off, this beer comes across as being one of these more modern takes on the American West Coast, if you like. It's not going to blow the head off you in terms of bitterness, and it's kind of intended to be sort of lighter and drinkable, actually. So bear that in mind when you try this beer for sure. This is definitely intended to be a sort of lighter, drinkable West Coast IPA, this one, rather than the big bitter things that we were used to back in 2012 to 2015 this kind of thing. But is it a nice beer? Yeah, it's pretty solidly done, this one, and the bitterness does build up a little bit the further that you go into the aftertaste. So yeah, I think this does make me curious enough to try a few of Nova Runda's other beers. Yeah, so just get the rest of this into the glass. There we go, because this will go down quite nicely. The thing for me that's interesting with this one thing I've always commented on with Slovenian beers is that the Slovenian beers tend to have this nice big oily fruity character to them. And the Croatian one, this one seems to have the same. And the IPAs that I've had from Garden Brewery come across in the same way as well. But there seems to be a bit of an unwritten rule in Europe that when a country that is good at winemaking, as Slovenia and Croatia are, you know, they tend to be good when it comes to craft beer as well. So it's not a surprise that this beer is pretty damn solid, actually. So yeah, definitely cool to feature these guys for the first time, like I say. But let's try and break down the flavour of this beer for you a little bit more, in a bit of a more detailed manner, can we say. So, backbone of the beer then. For me, this one, the backbone of the beer, this one actually really comes across in the flavour quite similar to what you would expect from the aroma. So straight away across the middle of your palate with this beer, you can feel a nice smooth bready character. It's a little bit more wholemealy, a little bit more kind of brown bready in its bready backbone than the aroma would have you believe. So yeah, right across that middle third of your palate, you can feel a nice kind of wholemealy brown bready character there. If you go to either end of that middle third of your palate, you start to get a bit more of a kind of intense grainy bread crust out of this one. Sitting on top of that wholemeal bread though, you do get a little hint of a kind of white bready character coming out of this one. I've not really, as far as memory goes, I can't think exactly what malt this would be. Maybe they are using some kind of Croatian malt in here that I've not come across before, because it feels quite different to other things that I've had. Because usually if you try a beer from countries around Europe, they'll use a bit of German malt or something like this, and it's quite distinctive. The German the smoothness of the German malt is very distinctive, but this one feels a bit different, and it's that that grainy sort of brown bready base that comes out of this one that makes it a wee bit distinctive. So that's interesting with this beer, and this is why we do these videos, to learn. But yeah, straight on top of that kind of more brown bready layer though, you get a little bit of a smoother white bread, which is interesting. And then in the very dead centre of your palate, you can feel there's a little bit of a kind of brown sugary circle in this one. So if you go to the dead centre of that, that's where you get a bit of a kind of straight up caramel note. And as you move kind of gradually outwards, if you move outwards from that kind of centre of the palate, you get a bit more of a kind of McVitie's digestive biscuity sort of thing. I don't know how good a reference McVitie's biscuits are for Croatians, of course, but yeah, it's like a sort of cookie type thing. You get a little bit of this cookie, biscuity, brown sugary sort of thing to this one, which is nice. More kind of grainy brown sugar in a sense. So yeah, it's quite straight shooting in its malt base, actually. As I've said in other reviews, I think there's two directions you can take a West Coast IPA in. They can be a little bit more kind of bready and biscuity, or they can be a bit more kind of oily and caramelly, and this one is the former. It's a more lighter bready kind of West Coast IPA, this one. A little bit more along the lines of Pliny the Elder rather than the Sierra Nevada Torpedo, which is a big oily type thing. But yeah, the malt base in this one is quite nicely done. But as I say, the graininess of the bread makes it a little bit unique in my mind, so I'd be curious to know more about what malt grains they're using in this one. But let's focus on some of the other parts of the beer. So, back third of your palate then. So border region between middle third and back third of your palate. Again, you get a little bit of a bready build up in this beer. So you can feel that. Sitting on top of that, you get a little bit more of a kind of grainy bread crust, which is great. And then as you move into the back third of your palate, you can feel the bread sort of smoothens out a little bit. You can feel a bit of that kind of grainy, wholemealy sort of bread and bread crust in there. Sitting on top of that, you get a bit more of a kind of smoother, white bready character. And then on top of that layer, you get a nice, more yeasty component coming out of the beer. So yeah, when you start at the back of the palate in this beer, you can feel the flavour is a little bit taller. And as you move further forward, it condenses down a wee bit, then into the middle third of your palate, it's a little bit more squashed together, and those flavours are nice and kind of pressed together, which I can certainly appreciate. So yeah, it goes together really nicely in that sense. So yeah, the malty and yeasty side of this beer works out quite nicely. But let's focus on the hops then. Back corners of the palate, there's definitely a wee touch of earthiness there, which you would come to expect. But as you move further forward from that, it quite quickly develops a bit of a kind of base layer of a more kind of piney resiny note, and that of course will be the Chinook that's going to give you that, and you've got the big floral notes sitting on top of that, and it's quite a bright floral aromaticity you get out of this one as you move further forward. It's got a wee touch of spiciness on the front corners of the palate, but yeah, I do like how it goes about its business, this beer, in that sense. So it does get a big thumbs up from me. It gets a big thumbs up from me in that sense. So yeah, I like the green component of this one. But remember, West Coast IPAs are more dependent on early edition hops, because remember, during your wort boil, early edition hops are the ones that give you bitterness, and as you go through the wort boil, there's a trade-off from bitterness in favour of flavour and aroma. And this one, the new more modern West Coast IPAs don't have quite as much bittering hops as they used to have, and then the New England IPAs of course are all about late and late addition and dry hops basically. So yeah, you do get a wee bit of bitterness out of this one, and it builds the further that you go into the aftertaste. But round the front curve of the palate, it's got a little bit of a brighter kind of zesty grassiness. But let's focus on that front third of the palate and the fruitiness out of this beer now. So yeah, border region between front third and middle third of your palate, you get a nice little bit of a kind of thicker breadiness in there, and a wee bit of a kind of bread crusty quality, which is good. Then the base of that front third of your palate is more kind of, you get a bit more of a kind of wholemealy thing and a bit more of a white bready character sitting on top of that. But yeah, on top of that you get a nice little bit of you get a bit of a more kind of oily, you get that nice oily bubble where those juicy fruity esters roll their way out of the beer. So yeah, the base of the fruity part of the beer is quite interesting too. But yeah, if you go towards the back of that front third of your palate, you get a bit of a stronger passion fruit, and that I think is going to be the Simcoe and the Comet that are both going to give you that. There's maybe a wee hint of grapefruit which will come. The stronger grapefruit will of course come from the Chinook, because that's a beast of a hop. Pine resins and grapefruit all the way. But yeah, the fruits are similar to what you pick up in the Aroma for sure. So yeah, a bit of a stronger, more oily passion fruit in this one, but as you move further forward, it does develop an almost kind of peachy flavour on top, but underneath you've got this dried apricot-y type thing, which is really interesting. So yeah, a mixture of dried peaches and apricots in this beer as you move towards the centre of that front third of your palate. When you move into the front half of that front third of your palate, though, you can feel you can definitely feel a sort of kind of coconutty vibe under this one, and this is the Sabro. So when you move into that front half of the palate as well, there's coconut underneath, and then there's a bit more of a kind of zesty tangerine orange sitting on top of it. But the Sabro, I think, does to a degree dominate the flavour of this one, and it sort of pushes the Comet and the Simcoe back a little bit. I would wonder if the Chinook has been added as the bittering hop in this, whereas in the other three hops have maybe been added as a 33 ratio later on, like 1/3 of each as a later addition hop. I've got a feeling that might be what's going on with this one, but I couldn't say 100% because there's not too much powerful grapefruit in this one. But yeah, the Comet and the Simcoe, I think, are giving you these dried passion fruity, peachy, apricot-y type notes, and then the Sabro's giving you that slightly coconut and more tangerine orangey sort of thing. But I think the Sabro just feels a little bit more pungent, so it could well be a 50% Sabro, 25 Comet Simcoe that they're doing in this one. I don't know. It would be interesting to know that, but regardless of what they've done with it, it is a pretty solid beer, this one, actually. So yeah, it's interesting for sure, definitely. I'm a sucker for orangey leaning, West Coast IPAs. So this one Does do quite a few things for me actually. But yeah, Amarillo, probably one of my favourite hops in this regard. And I love, I do love a little bit of Mosaic as well actually. Those are probably two of my favourite hops. But yeah, I think that kind of rounds off the flavour component of this beer as well. But yeah, in terms of the mouthfeel then, I would say that this beer is pretty mid-bodied. The carbonation is very smooth. It's got a nice little bit of a kind of oily slickness to it for sure, which you want from a West Coast IPA. It tells you that it's 60 IBUs on the can. I think I would have guessed maybe about 40 or 50 with this one. Remember, this is my weakest point of beer reviewing, is telling you the IBUs, so I probably would have got this wrong if it didn't say on the can. But yeah, that 60 IBU mark is definitely more of a kind of modern West Coast IPA property, if you like, rather than being 80 or 90 as the original West Coast IPAs would have been. But the malt base in this one, it's got a bit of a grainy bready underlying to it. It's got a bit of a smoother white bread and a bit of a kind of biscuity, caramelly sweetness to it. So a wee bit of everything, leaning more towards the biscuity, the bready biscuity end of the West Coast IPA spectrum. But lovely little bit of juiciness and slickness to the fruits, and then it's got a nice kind of floral leaning green component to it. But this is a solid West Coast IPA, I would say, from Nova Runda, and I think they've done a solid job with it. So I look forward to trying more of their beers. Hopefully, as I said, we can get the C4 IPA from them at some point. But I think that's a good way to round off this review. So yeah, as I said earlier, good luck to both Scotland and Croatia later, although obviously I'm a little bit biased since our first tournament in 23 years. So I'm hoping for a Scotland win, but if Croatia go through, fair enough. Good team. I do like them. But hopefully you guys enjoyed this review. Let me know your own thoughts on the beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Nova Runda as well. If you're watching from Croatia, do let me know some of the other Croatian breweries that I should take a look at. I do have a Doppelbock from another brewery sitting in the fridge, but I can't remember the name of them, and you'll see that appear at some point soon. But as I say, keep your Croatian brewery recommendations coming in. But thank you again for watching. Check out my social media, check out Nova Runda, and I'll see you guys again soon. This one is the Wash, the Wash, Rinse, Polish and Repeat, an American IPA, or West Coast IPA, I think, 6.3% ABV from Nova Runda in Zabok, near Zagreb in Croatia. Slange, Skull, cheers, and Živjeli. See you soon.